Sylvie join.
Good evening. My name is Katie Mangan, and I'd like to welcome you to the Do Tell Story Swap of Sonoma County. We have 5 tellers, maybe 6 tellers signed up right now. I'd just like to go over what we will do during the evening. A reminder is that stories are to be told and not read, and they can be up to 7 minutes, or if they're longer, maybe up to 10. And you could let us know if it's going to be like 10 or 12 minutes. That would be good. The first half, after the first half of the meeting, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll have told you a prompt, a question, and this is an icebreaker. And so we'll tell you this before the break, and so when you come back, we will take turns in introducing ourselves and answering the question. And so it's very fun, and we get to know more about each other. And I think that's all right now. Unfortunately, Brandon is not with us tonight, and neither is Meg. So there's just a small group, but this will be fantastic. So our first teller tonight is Beth Wakely.
It's so good to be here. I'm just centering in here just now. Okay. My story is a kind of a compilation of a number of different things. And it's a kind of a creation story from an indigenous type of background. So it's an oldie but goodie. In the very beginning, it was all water everywhere. And Hawk, being a good flyer, was still getting quite tired. No place to land at all. Oh, I wish there could be some place where I could rest. Well, up above, Great Spirit heard this and with a booming voice said, "All I need is a small bit of mud." Ah. So Hawk called out to all the water birds, and along came Goose and was told, "Could you just dive down deep enough to get some mud?" "Ah, I can do it," said Goose. "I am strong and big." And Goose spread his big, strong wings, flying as high as he could get in the sky. And diving down in that splash was quite great, but the Goose couldn't get enough air and couldn't make it, and came bobbing back up and said, "Oh, honk, can't be done. Oh, honk, it can't be done. If I can't do it, can't be done." Well, Duck watched this, and Duck just paddled right over and said, "I'll do it. I can dive deeper than Goose any day." Duck took up big, strong hop high, almost as high as you can breathe, and came swooping down again, closing up his wings right next to his body, going like a bullet through that water. Well, I'm sure if there'd been anybody watching, Duck would have certainly gotten deeper than Goose. But still, Duck ran out of air, could not breathe, came back up to the surface, popped through the water. "Quack, can't be done. Quack, quack, can't be done. I can't do it, can't be done." Watching all this was little Coot. Little Coot, that little mud hen. Big feet, small body. Coot said, "I'll do it. I can do it." Of course, Goose and Duck just kind of laughed at that, but, well, that little mud hen, she just didn't bother to fly. She just breathed in lots of air, filled her lungs, and went silently down into the water, and down and down and down, until, of course, she was out of air, but she forced that one big webbed foot down deep enough, and it collected just enough mud, and somehow held onto it as she went back up to the surface. I got it. I got it. Well, Great Spirit heard that, and out comes a hand, and in that hand went the little bit of mud, which grew and grew and grew and grew into a mountain of mud so much it had to go someplace. Well, Spirit had called all the turtles together, and Great Mother Turtle came up from the south, and relatives from the north, and the west, and the east, and they formed a very large turtle platform. Plop! Down came the mud. Plop! More mud. And the mud, well, it settled over the turtles' backs. Somewhere there were crevices, maybe they came valleys, and then there were bumps that were mountains and hills and so forth, and the seeds came, landed in that rich new soil, and sprouted very quickly. And ah, Hawk had a very nice place to land, as did all the other animals that were coming along. But sometimes those turtles, well, they get a little bit, of an itch here and a little bit of, just a little bit uncomfortable there, and they move. And we know that when the turtles move, the earth shakes just so. And that wraps up that story.
Mhm.
Beth, thank you so much.
You're
It's
welcome.
great. I love creation stories, and I love all this, the honk, it can't be done. And as you go through them, and all the way down to the turtles. Perfect. Thank you again. And now we have our good friend and our co-host, Vicky Ness.
Okay, sorry about that. I just love your sounds and your movements, Beth. That's so cool. Anyway, so bear with me because I'm the tech person, so forgive me. Things got a little wonky. This is a new story, and I'm giving it up. I'm just running it out of the garage here. So, Alma Tidy Bones was your average sort of old woman where she had lots of opinions. Yes, lots of opinions that went this way and that, falling out of her mouth and dancing around like butterflies. But there was one opinion she had that she kept close in her heart. It was a belief, it was a faith. It was something she held on to, and that was that every human being on earth has something precious to give back to the earth, back to the other generations that follow after. And it's every human being's right and responsibility and privilege to give that gift. Well, Alma Tidybone's gift was 5 acres of land. You see, she had a prim, neat little house with sparkling clean windows and freshly ironed curtains, little tiny house that sat right on the ragged hem of 5 acres of wild, wild woods right in town. Oh, it was a beautiful woods. She called it paradise because you see, there were enormous oaks that groaned and leaned in the wind, and saplings that rose up bright and green, and ropes of honeysuckle. And there were deer, and there were fox, and there were badger, and raptors and songbirds. And there was even a seasonal spring that popped up right after winter and burbled up silvery cold water all the way through August. It was paradise. And that's what she wanted to leave her town. Now, her town was a little nothing town. It's forgettable. It was so forgettable that people tended to shrug when they said the name of the town. She lived, you see, in Anywho, California. And the people who lived in Anywho were lovely people. They were very happy living there. I mean, there were maybe a dozen buildings straddling a scrawny state highway that went from nowhere in particular to somewhere else. There was a nothing little town. And the people of Anywho were fine with that, except for one person. That would be the odious man named Elias Grubb. Elias Grubb was hired by a real estate and development conglomerate whose octopus arms reached around the globe, sucking up innocent properties and turning them for profit. And they thought the boondocks of California was the perfect place to make a mint. And that was Elias Grubb's job. And he knew exactly what he was going to do. He had a concept for a plan, you see. He was going to have an industrial park right there on 5 acres of Alma Tidy Bones land. All he had to do was move her off. She's an old woman, not a problem. So he wrote her a letter, very nice letter, offering to buy it up for $10,000. Old ladies, they love getting things in snail mail, pushover. Well, he got a very nice note card back and in a spidery handwriting that said, "Oh, thank you very much, but no." Oh. So then he went to her door with shopping bags full of $10 bills, and he waved them in front of her when she opened the door. "Miss Tidybones, do you have any idea how rich you'll be? Do you know what $10,000 means?" And she said, "Yes, I do, sir. And it's Ms. Tidybones, and no." And she closed the door. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so that was when he called out his posse of corporate lawyers who came on her doorstep, and they did their weasel dance, and their little fangs shone and their little eyes glittered, and they pointed with their tiny little weasel paws. One little line, all she had to do was sign there, and they'd go away. And she was ferociously insulted, and she slammed the door right in their little weasel faces. Well, so there wasn't much else to do, you see, for Elias Grubb but to sit and wait. Because he figured, she wasn't just old, she was elderly. She was going to shuffle off anytime soon, and she had no heirs. He had checked into this. And so therefore the property was going to go into probate. And with a little finagling, he could pick it up for a song. All he had to do was sit and wait and will her to die. Well, she was elderly, and she did pass on, but not before she went outside and affixed herself to the side of the house like a barnacle to the hull of a ship. Well, the coroner came out, and he declared her well and fully dead, but they couldn't get her off of the house, you see. They tried crowbars, they tried heat lamps, they tried everything, but nope, she's not budging. Well, the Grim Reaper would come by every night, navigating his long, dark boat of sighs down the deep river of death. And he would summons her soul to come. "It is time, Alma, time to transition." And she looked at him and said, "Oh, no, I think not, thank you." And so he would go on his rounds. Mother Nature got fully annoyed and roiled herself up and spoke to Alma in no uncertain terms. Alma, that body of yours, that body is a loner. You got it when you were born. You have to give it back to me when you die. That's how it works. Now, that body of yours needs to come back to the garage, honey. It was a loner. Give it back to me." And, well, Alma Tidybones had to say, "No, ma'am, I don't think so." So nothing much happened. And anywho, the property papers shuffled and lawyers spoke on phones, and nothing much happened except stories all around the little town of Anywho about that spunky Alma Tidybones. She said no to that Grubb man. Oh my. And the stories grew more florid and more exciting. And then they did what really good stories always do. They sank down deep into the very ground we stand on. And they traveled underground, unseen, like the roots of Bermuda grass, all of a sudden popping up in this town, or that county, or that state, or that country. Stories of the stalwart old American woman who stood up to corporate greed delighted people all around the world, from Iceland to Ireland, from South Africa up to Siberia. And the spirit of Alma Tidybones followed the stories. She was delighted. Look at all these wonderful people. Oh, this is so exciting. But something even more exciting. You see, she realized that there was a society, a sisterhood of hags, legendary hags. And they were inviting her to keep them company. So there she was, having a bitter, smoky tea in the shadowy boneyard garden of Baba Yaga in Russia. Oh. And then she was invited up north to Norway with Ilya. Oh my goodness, that fragile, bent over old crone of Norway who could nevertheless wrestle the great god Thor to the ground. Oh my. And then down to the very southern tip of Australia, where the great old mother Walu would give birth to a day and a new day after that, and each one with a celebration of colors of her own choosing for the dawn. My goodness, that was just beautiful. But then she heard a yipping and a snapping and a noise that she couldn't quite define. So she went after it, and there it was, the Celia. Oh, the ancient old crone she-wolves that follow the Bedouin over the Saudi sands. Oh my goodness. And then the North Sea called her. And off she went and stood on a craggy, rocky mountain, calling in all the winter winds and the snow and the rains over the dark, roiling ocean. Come winter, she stood and she called out with the Caliac of Scotland. Oh my goodness, these women knew how to have a good time. But you know, as what happens when you travel, you get kind of homesick, and she was homesick for, mm, anywho. So back she went. But by this time, it was no longer called Anywho, it was Anywho. You see, it was packed with tourists. The place was hopping. There was a Tidy Bones museum. There was a Tidy Bones gift shop. And as the spirit of Tidy Bones wandered around town, she came to her own house, and there was a brass plaque that said, "Welcome to the Alma Tidy Bones State Park." Turns out the state had bought this property and was keeping it in contract for the next 100 years so that everybody in any who could come and visit. Oh my. Oh, the grubby little dreams of one Elias Grub had been extinguished. Tidy Bones won, and she wafted among the people as thin and gentle as a snowing breeze. And then she realized that, everybody wasn't looking at her paradise. They were looking at her, stuck to the wall there. They were having selfies taken, and they were checking how many clicks they got and likes they got. And she had become a social media sensation. She had become a TikTok star, but paradise is behind you, she kept whispering. Look over there, paradise is next to you. Look. But no, they were busy. So there was nothing much for her to do but to release her soul. And so that night, when the Grim Reaper came by again in that waving gray, dark boat of sighs, muttering to himself that he had to find some way to get Tidy Bones' damn ass off of that damn building, get her into the goddamn boat. He was sick of it. He had to check her name off of the list. And all of a sudden, here she comes, hopping along like a child, jumping into the boat and sitting, happy as a schoolgirl waiting for a school trip. Where are we going? Oh, 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 the Grim Reaper started navigating the boat as fast as he could down the dark rivers of death before the spirit of Tidy Bones changed her mind. And without a soul, her body fell into a pile of dirty old cottons and fetid flesh and bones, and Mother Nature snapped that up in one gulp and issued a not very ladylike and said to nobody in particular, "Well, thank you," and went on about her business. That left a blank wall. And people came, but there was nothing to see until they looked around themselves, and they started wandering into paradise. And so it is that if you happen to be anywhere near Anywho, California, and you happen to go to the Alma Tidy Bone State Park, you will see people wandering in awe among the beauty of her 5 acres of woods. And then you'll notice that they always come back to sit and listen to the park ranger tell the legend of Alma Tidybones, that tiny little nobody woman who prevailed not with the violence of warriors, not with the sticky fingered greed of the rich and famous, but with character and love and persistence, and pulling herself up to her 5'2" frame. The legend of Alma Tidybones lived, of somebody who looked death and Mother Nature, and a particularly odious Elias grub in the eye, and said quite clearly, no, thus saying yes to generations of paradise for everybody in Anywho, California. I don't know how long that was, but there it is.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicki. There are just so many wonderful pieces to it. And I mean, just your expressions and everything. I loved the Sisterhood of Hags. Oh, I'd love to hang out with all of them. And then Mother Nature saying that body is a loner. And the Grim Reaper. I mean, just fabulous. So thank you again for entertaining us. And yeah, we should all have a Elma Tidybones in our county or our neighborhood. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, so now next we have Rose Owens. Welcome, Rose.
Tonight, I bring to you the story of the Blue Rose, a folktale from China. Long ago and far away, in a province in China, there was an emperor, and he had a daughter, as beautiful as the dawn, and she was his pride and joy, his treasure. And as the years crept up on him and his steps slowed, he began to worry about this girl. What would she do when he was gone? How would she rule alone? And he decided it was time for her to get married, but she said, no, father, I want to stay with you. But he insisted. And finally, he conceded and said that she might choose one quality or one attribute that she would like in the husband that she would have. She sat that night in the garden with her old friend, the gardener's son. What should I choose? If I say he must be handsome, he might be cruel. If I say he must be kind, maybe he will be old or ugly. And as they talked, they decided that it must be a test, and it must be ambiguous enough that only she could decide if the test had been met. So she went to her father in the morning. She said, Father, I will marry the man who can bring me the blue rose. Now there had been a steady stream of suitors, but they dwindled and fell away, for there was no blue rose to be found. The merchant's son was not willing to give up that easily, not willing to look for it himself either. So he went to a flower vendor and he said, I will give you a bag of gold if you will bring me the blue rose. And the flower vendor looked, and he could not find a blue rose, but a bag of gold is not something to be taken lightly. And so he took a vase and he put blue dye into it, and he took a white rose and put it in the vase and waited as the water came up through the petals, and the petals turned blue. And he gave them to the merchant's son, and he said, take this rose, keep it in. And the merchant's son appeared before the princess, and in one fist he held a blue rose, and below it, below the stem, he held his hand. And as he walked up towards the princess, 3 pendants bounced up and down on his round belly. And he stopped before the princess and he said, Princess, choose me. I will give you silks. I will give you jewels to wear around your neck and in your hair. I will bring you exotic foods. And she looked down at his pudgy hands with a gaudy ring on each finger. And she looked into his face. And she looked down at his hand again, and there in the palm of his hand was a small puddle of blue dye. You have tried to deceive me. I cannot marry you. I must have someone who is honest and loyal. And she sent him away. Now the warrior, he thought he might marry the princess, and he went to a neighboring kingdom, and he went before the ruler, and he said, I hear you have a blue sapphire carved in the shape of a rose. Give it to me, or I will destroy you and half your kingdom. And the ruler, valuing peace, gave him the blue rose. And he appeared, and he was tall and handsome, and his shoulders were broad. And as he came down towards the princess, his black leather surcoat flapped back and forth to and fro as he walked. His red robe was belted with a silk belt. On it was embroidered golden and black tigers, the badge of his military honors. And as he stopped before the princess, he went down on one knee and he said, Princess, marry me. I will defend you. I will defend your borders. I will expand your borders. And she looked down into his eyes, and they were hard and cold as the stone rose in his hand. I cannot marry you. That rose is not real. I must have a real rose. And she sent him away. Now, the youngest advisor to the king, he had a cunning plan. He went to an artisan and he said, I want you to make me a bowl, and I want you to paint a blue rose on the outside of it, put gold trim around the edge, and it must be fragile and delicate. And when he had that bowl, he put it into a gold box, and he appeared in the door of the throne room. And he stood and paused to make sure that every eye was upon him. And as he walked down the aisle, he walked slowly so that people might see, well, that he was a fine emperor he would be. And he wore a blue silk robe with long sleeves, and on each sleeve was embroidered a five-toed dragon in gold threads. He stopped before the princess and he said, when you marry me, I will be the finest emperor that the kingdom has ever seen. And he stood and waited, and she looked at him. I will, he said, and she said, but where is the blue rose? And he took the gold box and he opened the lid, and there it was, the beautiful bowl. And she said, it is beautiful, but it is not real. I cannot marry you. And she sent him away. That night she sat in the garden, visiting with the gardener's son, and she said, I cannot marry any of them. I would have someone who is loyal and trustworthy and tells me the truth, as you have always done. I would have someone who does not try to deceive me. I would have someone who is kind and gentle, as you have been. I would have someone who values me for myself and not for the position that I hold, as you have. And she looked at the gardener's son with new eyes, and he smiled. Princess, wait for me tomorrow in the blue room at sundown, and I will come, and I will bring you the blue rose. And so she waited in the blue room as it came close to sundown. And the gardener's son appeared at the door of the throne room, and in his hand he held a rose. And as he advanced toward her, the rays of the setting sun came through the blue stained glass window. Light hit the petals of the white rose in his hand, and they glowed with a translucent blue glow. And she said, it is the blue rose. And the people said, what? But that's the gardener's son. That's a plain white rose. And she stood up and said, let me tell you what I see. I, who has always been kind. I see a young man who values me for who I am and not my position. And I say that he holds the blue rose. And if you cannot see it, you are colorblind. And the emperor stood up beside her and he said, if my daughter says it is the blue rose, it is the blue rose. And he took her hand and he placed her hand in the hand of the gardener's son. And they were wed. And they lived happily ever after. Not because this storyteller says so, and not because that's the way that love stories always end, but because they knew that their happiness was in their hands. And that is the story of the Blue Rose.
Rose, that was wonderful. Great telling. And I loved all the different descriptions of the suitors and, why each of them, what they wore, but then again, why each of them wasn't the right one until the gardener's son. Just really so well told. Thank you so much. Great story.
Thank you.
And now we have Sharon Elwell to be our next teller. Welcome Sharon to the stage.
Thanks, Katie. This is a historical story. In 1859, John Brown was hanged for treason. As a militant abolitionist, he was of the belief that the curse of slavery was only going to be done away with by violence. An anonymous donor had sent him $30,000 and he assembled an arsenal of weapons. He intended to initiate a slave uprising. The difficulty was that enslaved people didn't want to participate in such a perilous enterprise. His uprising failed and he was eventually hunted down and captured and killed. And in his pocket, there was a note. The note mentioned the donated money and promised more. And the note was signed with only initials, M.E.P. And nobody knew who those initials belonged to. Nobody in his circle had those initials. We now know that the $30,000 was withdrawn from a San Francisco bank account by a white woman, a widow named Mary Ellen Smith. We also know that the initials MEP belonged to a Black woman named Mary Ellen Pleasant. And we know that Mary Ellen Smith and Mary Ellen Pleasant were one and the same person. And how that came to be, I'm going to try to tell you in her own words. The first thing you have to know is that I lied. I lied about everything. I lied about my birth, my parentage, my name, everything. And if you think that wasn't necessary, then you know nothing about the country that I lived in. Oh, it's got the same latitude and longitude as the country you live in, but it was not the same place, not in any way. And the laws of miscegenation were just part of the difficulty. I worked on the Underground Railroad, helping escaped people get to safer territories. And my first husband, James Smith, God rest his soul, was a serious abolitionist who helped me to transport these people for many years. But when we decided to marry, it would have been a felony, a criminal act. He was not able legally to marry a Native American woman or an Asian woman, but particularly not a Negro, as we called ourselves in those days. So there was nothing for it but for me to become a white woman. And oddly enough, that's not as difficult as you would think. As we worked on the railroad, I was in many situations. Sometimes I was a slave, sometimes I was a slave owner. I was once even an old man, a peddler pulling a wagon full of trinkets and runaways. I had become quite a good actress. And of course, I learned that it's all in the gestures and attitude with which you present yourself. And I had a wonderful wardrobe and servants, and people see what they expect to see. And so for many years, I was Mary Ellen Smith, this white woman. And when James died, I continued my work on the railroad, and his friend, J.J. Pleasant, who had been a foreman on some of our properties, we decided to marry. But he was a Black man, so that should have been a perfectly legal marriage. However, all of my property that James Smith had left me, the bank accounts, the deeds, the stocks, bonds, everything, were all in the name of Mary Ellen Smith, a white woman. And so to protect my assets, we continued with the deception. Now, JJ was right beside me all of his life, but he was not my husband. He was my butler. He was the carriage driver. He was my accountant for a while. He had many roles, but none of them were my husband. So for years, I was two people. To the people uptown in San Francisco, I was Mrs. Smith, the wealthy widow. To the people that traveled in the wind, in the Underground Railroad, I was Mrs. Pleasant, a Black woman, or sometimes Mammy Pleasant, but I never liked that title. So went on that way for some time. And then in 1865, a miracle took place. The 13th Amendment passed. Slavery was no longer legal. The 14th Amendment guaranteed equal protection under the law to Black people and to white people. And the day I found out about that, I walked down to the City Hall in San Francisco and I changed my name in the city registry. In just a few moments, Mary Ellen Smith became Mary Ellen Pleasant, and I was just one person. I was proud of that. But the thing that was most important to me, and the thing that I wanted printed on my tombstone, was she was a friend of John Brown.
Thank you, Sharon. Wow, that's such a complicated story, and you just told it so well, and you just simplified it so we could just follow each stage. So thank you. It was really, really good. Are you going to tell that at the genre? Or
I might. I think so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. Excellent. Shall we pause for a break now? Would that be a good idea? Okay, so we shall take a short break, maybe 5 minutes or so. We could maybe come back at 7:50. We have a question, a prompt for you to think about. What is your favorite comfort food on a wet, wild, and windy day? So why don't we take our break and then we'll come back, we'll have announcements and we'll answer the prompt and then we have more stories. So thank you so much.
Now try it.
Great, here we are back from our break. Welcome everyone. So now we are going to introduce ourselves and we're going to answer the question, which is, what is your favorite comfort food on a wet, wild and windy day? So I will start. My name is Katie Mangan and I live in Santa Rosa. And what is my favorite comfort food? Well, I guess other than chocolate, it would be, I've just taken a cleanse and we were eating a lot of vegetarian food with lots of spices and we had some great soup and vegetable stew recipes. So I think that would be what I would eat on a cold, wet, rainy day. And so I'm going to ask Vina, what is your favorite comfort food on a wet, wild, rainy day?
Um, a classic hot chocolate.
Excellent.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Vina and I live in Pengrove.
Rose, what is your favorite comfort food on a wet, wild and windy day?
Well, chocolate, but usually it's a hot chocolate with whipped cream on the top. I'm Rose Owens and I live in Livermore, California.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Beth, how about you?
Well, I like to curl up with a book and a cauliflower soup, which you have to have it real smooth. My daughter has that wonderful recipe and it's just so rewarding. So, and I'm Beth and I live in Sebastopol.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth. Vicky.
My favorite comfort food on a really cold, nasty day is sort of like Beth, to curl up on the sofa and look out at all the stuff happening outside with a big steaming cup of chai latte that I've made with cinnamon on the top and the whole nine. It's just so fragrant and yeah.
Oh, that sounds so good. Yes. Sharon, how about you?
I'm Sharon. I live in Washington. And my favorite comfort food on a cold, windy day would be tomato soup with a grilled cheese sandwich to dunk in it.
Oh, that does sound good. Yum. Renu, what is your favorite comfort food on a cold, wet, rainy day?
Well, that would be tomato soup and some nice crunchy garlic bread.
Mm.
Oh, yes. Excellent. Make me really hungry. So, gosh, Renu. I think Walter, you're next. What is your favorite?
I am from Sacramento. Sharon, your ability to tell a complicated story very well was beautifully done. Very well done.
Well, thank you.
Whole Foods clam chowder.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Lovely. Now, I'm just kind of lost in this. So I'm going to go now to Gay. What is your favorite comfort food?
My name is Gay Barner and I live in Santa Rosa and I'm one of the hot chocolate people. It seems so comforting to have that.
Good, good, good. Shri, what is your favorite comfort food?
I'm a coffee person, and on a rainy day, I would like to have steaming coffee with milk, of course, and very less sugar and strong coffee powder. The aroma itself would revive me. But if coffee is not food and it's a drink, then in India we call it khichdi, or pongal down south. It is like made with rice and clarified butter and lentils. It's, steaming khichdi is a very comfort food with something called as papadam, a fried stuff to have it in between to crunch on. So that's a hot, it should be steaming hot again. So that is the comfort food. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds very delicious. Laura.
I'm really bad compared to all of you. Oliver's has these great stuffed potatoes, and I'll get one of those and I'll add more to it.
heart attacks and everything else. Just forget it all. And I just love them. So
Oh, that's so good. So what do you add when you say you add more?
I add more cheese. I like really flavorful cheese, you know, like Beamster or like a real sharp cheddar. They have a little cheese in there and a little bit of bacon, a little bit of broccoli and stuff. Well, definitely have to double up on the cheese and maybe some onion and then some spices too from Iraq.
Mm.
Yum. Excellent idea. So I think next, would that be Genevieve?
Sure. I'm Genevieve. I'm in San Francisco, and I'd say pretty much any number of soups. And when someone mentioned, I think someone mentioned Thai soup, that sounded really particularly good. But I have been, my go-to these cold days recently has been kind of a mocha that I make at home with chocolate and coffee and a combination of oat milk and almond milk and cinnamon, or chocolate chai latte. Ooh,
Yum. Great. Thank you.
Chocolate figures highly in these conversations.
It's food of the gods or the goddess. Joy, what is your favorite comfort food? You need to unmute. Can you unmute yourself, Joy?
There.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we can't
Okay, hear you.
Try
Joy,
unmuting yourself again.
Joy, I'm so sorry that we can't hear you. But you're unmuted, it says. Maybe you could put it in the chat and we can read it later. I'm sorry. Oh, darn.
Sometimes if someone goes out and comes back in, the sound will come back.
So I think we've asked everybody. Is that right? Do you want to try again, Joy, or? No, it's not working. Okay, sorry about that. Let's move on to the announcements. Now, Vicky is now going to change hats and going to be our announcer. So thank you, Vicky. Take it away.
Just a couple of real short announcements. Next Wednesday, which is the 19th, the genre is love stories, and our very own Genevieve will be there telling her story. So if you haven't signed up, please do through SAC. And secondly, of course, we always offer office hours. Katie and I are open on the first Tuesday of every month, and you can sign up for a half-hour slot and just practice your story or ask questions or do whatever you want. It's your half hour. Just email either me or Katie and let us know if you're interested, and we'll put you down. And I'll put my email in the chat. And that's all the messages I can think of. Yeah, at the moment. So.
And Joy, thank you so much that you would have pasta, any kind. Excellent choice. Good, thank you. And probably some chocolate thrown in, knowing you, right? Okay. Right. So now back to the stories, and we have Renu. Welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. This morning, I'll be sharing a story that I've written myself. And the inspiration came this morning when I saw this little puppy following this man. Murali had just walked into his house. He removed his shoes, put down his bag, and was just about to go into the washroom to wash his face when his phone started to ring. He picked it out of his pocket and looked at it. It was Vignesh, a very close friend. He answered it and said, "So, Vignesh, what's up?" "Hi, Murali. I just called because I wanted to ask you, would you like to adopt a puppy?" "A puppy? All out of the blue like this? Why, Vignesh?" While my dog just delivered just 2 puppies, and I was wondering if you'd like to adopt one. I know you wanted one all these years, but for some reason or the other, you couldn't adopt one. So would you be interested? Let me think. My parents are not too keen on their dogs, but perhaps they wouldn't mind so much now. Murli was still living with his parents. He was 25, he was working, financially independent, but like all Indian children, couldn't leave his parents alone. He was the only child, and he felt bad to tell them, I want to go live somewhere else. So he continued living with them, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His parents were wonderful people, and they had never ever criticized him, brought him down, or been mean to him. They'd always been kind and generous, and somehow he just didn't feel like leaving them. Okay, I think I will come and have a look at the pups tomorrow, said Murli. Finished off the call, went into the washroom, had a wash, and then had his dinner with his parents. He didn't say anything to them, just had a usual normal conversation, went to bed. Next evening, on his way back home from work, he stopped by Vignesh's house. I'm not going to make up my mind till I see the dogs, he thought to himself. He loved dogs, but had never really seriously thought about adopting once he started working. He went into Vignesh's house and rang the bell. The door was opened. His friend smiled at him. Ah, there you are. Come on, let's go and see the dogs. Are, he just walked in. He's come straight from work. Is that the way you treat your friend? Vignesh's mother came out. Let's at least offer him a cup of coffee or something to eat. It's okay, auntie, it's okay. I just think I'll just go ahead and see the puppies. Okay, she said, and off they went. Vignesh took him to the backyard, and there they were, the 2 puppies with their mom. Puppies were running around here and there. One was brown, the other was tan. The mother came by, sniffed it, wagged her tail, and Murli gave her a pat. He called out to the puppies. The brown one just gave him a look and ran away. The tan puppy came running towards him, sniffed his shoes, tried to stand up on her 2 legs, trying to get at his pants. So he bent down and petted her, picked her up, and smelled her mouth. He loved smelling puppies' mouths. They always smell so sweet of milk and puppy breath. She gave him a lick on his nose. I think this one is for me, said Murli with a smile. Are you sure? It's a female. You're okay with female dogs? Of course, what does gender matter? She chose me. I didn't choose her, said Murli with a smile. And so he took the puppy inside the house, played with her for a little while, and then said, Vignesh, I think I better head home. I need to introduce the new member of the family to my parents, and I want to see their reaction, he said. Would you have some coffee? Asked Vignesh's mother. No, it's okay. I normally don't drink coffee at this time, auntie. I'll just head home. Okay, bye da, he said to Vignesh, and off he went. He reached home, went into the house. The puppy was quiet. Ma, come here. His mother came out. What's this? She said. The new member of our family, Mom. Are you okay with this? Of course I'm fine with it. You wanted a dog all your life and you always kept saying no. Now that both of us are at home and you're at work, of course, we'll take care of our grandchild, she said with a smile. Only smiled at her and said, thank you, Ma. Where's Pa? Oh, he's outside doing some work. I don't know what he's doing. Okay. So he went out, let the puppy down in the garden, and the puppy ran towards his grandpa. Murli's father turned around and said, oh, we have a new one, is it? Went down and started petting the puppy. Looks like everybody's accepted you, Sabapati. Sabapati? Said his father, little concerned. Is that a good name for a girl? Well, Pa, Sabapati means leader of the group, and I think she's a leader. Everybody smiled, and that was that. 2 years went by. Sabapati grew into a tall dog with long legs, a long tail, long ears, a long snout, and bright, beady eyes. She could jump as high as possible. She could even jump up to kiss Murli on his face without having to do anything else. They got along just fine. Unlike other dogs, as a puppy, she didn't chew too many things. She was very well behaved. She always called him when she wanted to go outside to do her job. So everybody got along very well in the family. 2 years had gone by, and now the second love in Murli's life walked in. Jyoti. She was a corporate trainer. And Murli was in charge of training. So one day when he entered his office, somebody was waiting to see him. It was this young lady who had long curly hair, bright black eyes with long lashes, a rather crooked nose, and lips somehow didn't go well with her face, but somehow enchantingly beautiful. Her eyes sparkled with both naughtiness and intelligence. One look and Murli had fallen in love. As for Jyoti, nothing ever showed on her face. The expression was always rather poker. So Murli had no idea whether she liked him or not. But anyway, they got into a conversation and it was agreed that she would train the employees on soft skills, and the training started. Murli didn't have to attend because he was way above that, and he continued his work. But every evening he got the chance to have a conversation with the love of his life. Not that she knew about it. But as the days went by, Jyoti seemed to like him too. And one day, he straightway asked her, "Shall we go out and have a cup of coffee?" "Why not?" she said. And so off they went. And every day became a habit. And soon, it was clear that both were in love. And so Murli thought it was time to introduce her to his family. But unfortunately, both sides of the parents didn't agree to the match. You see, they belonged to different communities, and the parents did not agree. Well, Murli and Jyoti were not going to give up their love, and so they decided to go ahead and get married. They had a very simple marriage in a small temple, just close relatives. Jyoti's older sister and Sabapati from Murli's side. Jyoti was not too fond of dogs, but she liked Sabapati. They decided to rent a house close to the beach, because that's where Sabapati was used to be. Murli's parents also lived very close to the beach, and Murli chose a house that wasn't too close so that he could still keep an eye on them. And so their domestic life started. A year later, Jyoti was pregnant, and she told Murli, "Murli, I'm not too happy having a dog around when the baby's born. I don't like the idea. You see, what if the baby's allergic?" "Oh, come on, Joe. Nothing like that is going to happen. Dogs are absolute slave. In fact, it's good for a child to grow up with a dog. You know, they become so much more compassionate. Maybe I didn't grow up with a dog, but I think it'd be very good for the baby." Jyoti wasn't convinced. You see, there was a reason behind this request. Every morning when she woke up, she always found the space next to her empty, because Murli took Sabapati for a long walk. And she didn't like that. She would have loved to cuddle up to him, maybe share a small warm snuggle before she got out of bed. She was jealous of Sabapati. She didn't like the idea that Murli loved Sabapati perhaps as much as he loved her. Now, this was the perfect chance for her to somehow get Sabapati out of Murli's life. But Murli was having none of it. "I'm not giving Sabapati away. She's so used to her. She's part of the family. How can you say that, even Joe?" And so Joe kept quiet. But as the days went by and the pregnancy progressed and it was close to almost delivery time, he knew from Jyoti's mannerisms and expressions that she wasn't happy at all. And he didn't want her to be unhappy during this crucial time. And so he called up Vignesh one day and said, "Vignesh, do you think you could take Sabapati for a few months? I'm not giving her away. She's very much part of the family, but I just want you to have her for a few months till the baby is born. And then I can convince Joe to have her back." Sure, Vignesh agreed. And so Sabapati went to live in Vignesh's house, which wasn't again not very far from where they lived. Days went on. Now that Sabapati was no longer there, Jyoti had Murli all to herself, and she had that morning cuddle. The big belly was always there between them, but it didn't matter. It was just a month away from her delivery. and she had been asked by the doctor to take long walks, both morning and evening. She was off from work. Murli continued to go to work. And one evening, as Jyoti was walking along the street, it was pretty dark, it was 6:30 in the evening, but it was winter. She wasn't at all afraid, and so she was walking. But there was nobody else on the street. Just then, somebody came by, walking, of course. She heard footsteps behind her and she looked around, and it was a young man. Suddenly, he leaned towards her and yanked at her chain. It was a chain Murli had tied around her neck at the time of marriage. It's also called a thali in India. And she wasn't going to give that chain away. She held on to it. But the man pushed her down. Help! She shouted out. Help! The man was still standing over, trying to yank the chain. Her stomach had started to hurt. Help! She shouted. But nobody heard. But there was someone who heard. Sabapati. She had long, sharp ears, you see. She heard, and she recognized Joe's voice. With one leap, she jumped over the wall and rushed towards where Joe lay. A snarl, she jumped on the man. He took one look at this dog and ran for his life. Jyoti was a water broke, and she lay there, crying out in pain. Sabapati had no idea what to do. Only thing she knew to do was to howl. She went louder and louder and louder till somebody opened their door and came out. Oh my God, there's Jyoti on the street. He came rushing out. And Jyoti said, ambulance, I think my baby's coming. And so they called for the ambulance. The ambulance came rushing. She was rushed into the ambulance and off it went. Now that everything was okay, Sabapati walked back, jumped over the wall again, and lay down quietly, waiting for Vignesh to come. Finally, somebody called Murli. Murli was shocked to hear the news. He rushed to the hospital. By then, word had got round to Murli's parents as well. They too went to the hospital. Murli was right in time when she was being rushed into the emergency ward. Murli, you're here. How's Sabapati? What happened to her? She's fine, Joe. You just focus on yourself. Focus on the baby. Okay, she said. Soon the doctor was next to her. And Murli was about to leave and she said, it's okay, you can stay. And so Murli watched as his wife struggled through her delivery pains and finally delivered a healthy baby girl. Ah, another woman to adore, said Murli. He took the baby in his arms and kissed her gently on her forehead. And that's when Joe said, bring Sabapati home. I want our baby to grow up with him. And Murli smiled and tears came down his face. His heart was full. Thank you.
Thank you, Renu. What a sweet story. It's lovely. So many sort of emotions, and it's wonderful. I love that. And also, as we know, puppies and dogs, they choose their owners. You're so right. Thank you again. Okay, so now we have Laura with her pocket story. Welcome, Laura, to the stage.
Hello. I have this advanced reader copy of a novel I'm going to be releasing in May. And when I've talked about it with folks, you know, one of the things I've said is, oh, there's a story within the story of how Shinbone Lane got its name. But that's like a long story. It's revealed in pieces in the novel. And I just realized this week that there's actually a shorter little pocket story within the story. And so I can tell that tonight because there's two characters, a young man who has borrowed a motorcycle from a friend, and he's sweet on this girl who lives not too far from him, and he has gotten her to go for a motorcycle ride with him. He's a native San Franciscan, and she's new to the city. So he drives her all over the city, and there's all these incredible vistas in San Francisco and so many things to see. It was just a wonderful day. And they got to Golden Gate Park, which is just an incredible park in and of itself, went all through the various sites to see, and they came to Stowe Lake. And they decided it would be a good time to stop and have a little drink of water and look at the lake. And, that water was sparkling and there were shadows on the stone bridge that leads to Strawberry Hill Island. And it was just gorgeous. And so they were talking, joking, having a good time. And he said, well, there's a story that goes along with this lake. It's called The Lady of the Lake. And so she wanted to hear it. And then he told her that at the turn of the 20th century, there was a young mother who was by herself quite a bit because her husband was a traveling salesman. And this baby was just 2 months old and had colic, and she didn't know anybody in the city. She was from Kansas or Missouri, someplace far away. And so she was going through a really rough, lonesome time. And plus, it had been raining and raining, so she couldn't even go out for long and have a nice stroll with the baby. But then one day, there was a break in all the rain. The sun came out, it warmed up. And so she went out for a stroll. It was so good to be out there with the sunshine on her face. And she lived close to Golden Gate Park. And she walked through the park and she came upon Stowe Lake. And she decided to stop, just like this young modern couple stopped to, look at the lake and enjoy the peace and quiet and beauty there. And she sat on a bench, and the baby in the carriage was right by her side. And then this middle-aged woman came up and joined her. And they got to talking. And this woman had raised children, hers were grown, and the young woman had so many questions, and she was so eager to learn from somebody and to just be talking with another adult. It was just, such an unburdening of her soul, and she just got more and more engrossed in the conversation. And they talked and they talked and they talked. And she didn't notice that when the wind picked up, it took the carriage and swept it into the lake. She wasn't facing that way. She was absorbed in this conversation, and it was just such a relief to her. She wasn't thinking about anything else. But then finally the woman said that she had to be going. It had been quite a while. They'd been talking for a long time. So they bid farewell to each other. The woman got up to go, and the young mother turned it, and the carriage was gone. She turned immediately toward the other woman, and she wasn't there. She wasn't even just walking away in the distance. She was nowhere to be found. Well, the young mother panicked. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't imagine what would have happened. She ran all around the lake. She ran across the bridge all around the island, and she was asking people, have you seen my baby? Have you seen my baby? Has anybody seen my baby? And she did this for hours and hours, and nobody had seen the baby. Nobody could help her. And it was growing late in the afternoon, and then it was growing dark into the evening. And finally, she realized that her baby must have gotten blown into the lake. And so she went to the lake, and it looked to her like there was part of the carriage there visible. And she dove in, but she didn't know how to swim. And so she drowned. And ever since then, people say it's not a good idea to go to Stowe Lake at night. Because if you're there, she will rise up soaking wet from the water with the long curled fingernails, stringy hair. And she will ask you, "Have you seen my baby? Have you seen my baby?" And if you say no, she'll let out this blood-curdling scream that'll just haunt you forever. You will never, ever be able to forget about her, and she'll always be there in your mind. But if you say yes, she will grab you and pull you into the water and drown you. Now, when the young woman heard this story, she said, "Oh, that's really scary and not so nice." And he said, "Yes, it is." But then he told her it reminded her of something in her background that he really shouldn't have known. So their little afternoon together took a terrible turn. It was no longer a beautiful time seeing the sights. She said, "We're leaving right back." She stormed to the motorcycle. They didn't speak to each other at all the way home. And you're going to have to read the book to find out what happened after that.
Oh my gosh. Laura, that's amazing. That is a very eerie and tragic story. And you just sucked us all in. I am very curious. So you have a book launch coming up. Do you have a party we can all go to? Shinbone Lane?
Yes, I'm actually looking for advanced readers, people who will read an advanced copy and leave a review when the book launches on launch day. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll
Yes.
read it.
I could put my email in the chat, and you could email me if you want to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is so exciting.
One of these days, maybe you can tell us a story about how you put your book together.
That's kind of a long story, huh?
Probably.
But there is like a quick little thing that when I first moved from San Francisco to Sonoma County, I was doing freelance work, so I could bring some of it with me, but not all of it. So I was looking for other work. And I met with this man who was probably a couple decades younger than I was. And it wasn't like a good fit for, work for me to do, but we had this great conversation. And I was telling him about coming to San Francisco with a banjo and a beret and like $200 and just, not leaving. And he said to me, "Well, that sounds like a fairy tale, And it would come to mind every so often, that statement that he made. And I was thinking about how different things were in the 70s than they are now, or even, when I first moved up here, and even more so now. And I always thought, well, maybe when that came to mind, I thought, maybe I'll write a book about that sometime. And I started out thinking that's what I would do, but books have their own ideas about what they're going to be. And so it turned out to be a very different thing than anything based on really my experiences and the people I knew and the things we did, I mean, a lot of my experience goes into it, but it's its own little thing. The book did its own thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing and giving us a little preview. That's so wonderful.
Thank you.
Lovely. And now we have Shri to tell us a story. Welcome, Shri, to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I think Renu left, so it's only good evening to you all. So I'm Sri Karuna from India on the East Coast. Yeah, I stay in the coastal city. That's my backdrop. So this story is about a professor. There was a professor. He was a very well-read one, very respected, and his lectures were wonderful. Students would flock to his classes, and he brilliantly delivered all his lectures, and he was in one of the most prestigious colleges. On one busy day, he had a lecture scheduled, and he prepared with all his inputs, anecdotes, and everything. And it was a very complex subject that he was going to teach that day. But when he entered the class, there was no one, not even a single student. And just then, one lady walked in. He was happy to see her. And he said, "Come on, have your seat." And he thought, maybe I'm early for my class today. I'll wait for some more time for some more students to walk in. He waited for 5 minutes. Then he thought, oh my God, I prepared so much and there will be less time. I can't wait further. But at the same time, how can I just deliver this lecture to one single student? All these thoughts were going on in his mind. And then he said to that lady, I don't think the other students are coming in. I'll postpone this lecture. I apologize to you and all. She looked at him. He could not read her expression. Whether she was forgiving him, she was allowing him to postpone the lecture or cancel the lecture. Then he asked her, what would you do if you were in my place? And she said, look, sir, I don't know much about your subject. I'm not so well educated. I come from the farming community and I wanted to know a little bit of economics. But on my farm, if I went to feed the cows and all the cows are not there and there is a single cow, I would still feed that cow. Taking that cue, the professor felt encouraged, and to this single student, he wanted to give his lecture. And he had prepared so much. So for 3 hours, he went on and on and on with all his energy, all his passion, all his knowledge. He delivered the lecture. And at the end of the class, because she was the sole student that whom he gave the lecture to, he wanted to have a feedback. And he said, so, how did you like the lecture? And she said, sir, again, I will use my farming example to you. If I go on the farm and there is only one cow, I wouldn't feed all the fodder to that single cow of all the cows to that one single cow. And he didn't know what to say. He just shrugged his shoulders and walked away. So that's the end of my 2-minute tiny story.
Oh, that is wonderful. I just love it. It's just perfect. Short, sweet, to the point, and just the visual of not, you wouldn't, if the herd of cows is not there, but there's one cow, you feed the cow, and then of course you don't feed the cow everything. Thank you. I really, really like all the lessons and how you put it together. So perfect. Excellent.
I borrowed this from a book by Sue Hollingworth in USA. Yeah, I borrowed the story. I added a little more of my own. It was more shorter. I just added my own bits, but the bones of the story are from hers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Great. Wow. So I think it's my turn. All right. So you're all sitting comfortably. This is a story about winter. And it's an Eduardo story. And Eduardo, he lives deep in the countryside, in a house that's been in his grandmother's family for generations. It's an old, rambling, very beautiful house with gardens around it. And he has decided that he needs a cook or a housekeeper, but there's nobody local who would be qualified. And so he advertises in the city, and he only gets one reply, and it's from a woman called Alice. And so he decides to go to the city to interview her. And after they meet and they've been talking for a little while, he realizes that she is overqualified, but she's delightful. And so they continue to talk. But at the end, he wants to wrap it up and he wants to make it clear that, you know, she'd be so bored with the job. And so he looks at her and he smiles and he says, you know, Alice, people say that I live on the road to nowhere. Now, it has the opposite effect because she immediately thinks to herself, who lives on the road to nowhere? And what do they do, these people who live on the road to nowhere? And more importantly, what do they eat? So she extended her hand and they shook hands, and he realized she had a very firm, confident handshake. And she said, I will be joining you at the beginning of November, and I will leave at the beginning of May. And he was surprised, but delighted. Well, Alice didn't arrive at the beginning of November because a series of storms came through, rain and wind. And at the end of the month, there was a little window and she sort of sneaked in. And then as soon as she had got to the house, the winds and the rains came. And in fact, it was even difficult to look out of the window because there was so much rain coming down. But she explored the house. She sort of found out how things were working. But she had heard about the gardens, especially about the walled garden. And so one afternoon, when it was relatively calm, Eduardo suggested that they go to the walled garden. And she was very excited. And old Willem, the gardener, came too. And when they got to the garden, Alice was so surprised because the walls were so high. They were like 12-foot high walls made of the local stone, and they were thick. And in the wall, one of the walls, there was a doorway, and it wasn't a very tall doorway. And the reason for that was that the gardens had been designed for the women. It was when the women had sacred plants and they grew sacred herbs, and this was really a sanctuary for them. And before opening the door to the garden, Eduardo said quite a long prayer in the ancient language, and she didn't understand anything, but she did hear her name mentioned a few times. And then he opened the door and walked through. And when she saw the garden, she was so surprised. She actually was standing on the threshold. She had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the garden, because the garden wasn't pristine or orderly. With all the storms that had come through, I mean, everything was everywhere. And she was just aghast, stunned. But then she heard water off to the right. And so she walked over and noticed there was a spring. And Eduardo said, Alice, you need to introduce yourself to the spring. You need to tell it your name, where you come from, what you've done in your life so far, what are your hopes, what are your dreams. And then when you've said all that you can think of saying about yourself, then you must talk about your mother. And then after that, you must talk about your mother's mother, and then your mother's mother, and go down the matriarchal line for as long as you can. And so Alice sat by the spring and she began to talk about herself. And as she did so, she felt very humbled. But then she felt this sort of weaving of comfort and of love, of being seen by the spring. And so she talked and talked and talked until she had no more to say. And then she walked over to Eduardo and old Willem the gardener, and they'd lit a fire and they had brewed some tea. And so she sat with them. And it was then that she remembered that deep in her coat pocket, she had 3 muffins that she had baked that morning. And so she offered them each a muffin. And Eduardo smiled to himself and he thought, yes, Alice is this type of person who never leaves home without something to eat and something to share with others. And they sat by the fire. And even though it was cold, the fire did warm them. They could hear the wood crackling, and they could smell the smoke. And she was so peaceful sitting there. And then she looked up and she saw the gray smoke, but mingled with the gray smoke were these thick white snowflakes coming down, and they would when they hit the fire. And they still sat there as the snow came thicker and thicker and thicker, until Eduardo said that it was time for them to leave. And he explained to Alice that they wouldn't be returning until the spring, because the snow would provide Mother Earth or grandmother with a thick white blanket. Right now she was resting and sleeping, but under this thick white blanket, she would dream. And she would dream in the new year. She would dream in the seeds and all the plants that they would need during the coming year. And so they left the garden. Alice said goodbye to the spring. Eduardo closed the door and locked it. And Alice walked back to the house through the snow. And she realized that the next couple of months, she would be within the house, dreaming in her new year. Blessings, abundance, and healing to you all. So there you have it. So we've had a wonderful evening. Such great stories. This is so cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Shall we, can you highlight it? Can you put us all together, Vicky, or is that kind of impossible?
Put all who together?
Well, you know how Brandon does, or shall we just?
Oh, you know what? There's like 3 people who didn't tell a story. So basically it's all of us.
Yeah, well, why don't we have all of us? Can we do all of us? Or not?
I don't think so. I don't know how to do that.
All right. So I'm just going to shout out to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you to Beth for your wonderful creation story. To Vina, thank you for listening.
I just have something to share. Katie, just a moment. I have something to share. So every full moon night, I hold space. Vicky has been in one of those. So today being the Feb month, Valentine's Day is close by. I have a session tonight with Indian storytellers. It's in the moonlight of love stories. You know, love is the theme for this month. And I'm sharing the Zoom link also in the chat in case it is 8:30 p.m. India time. So please convert it on Google to your US time. It'll be your early morning time. And I would be honored if some of you could join. Yeah, with your morning cup of chocolate, coffee, whatever. I'm just sharing the Zoom link here.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, that's so exciting. Wow. That'd be
it's
cool.
really wonderful. Very fun.
Oh, that is lovely.
Thank you so much. Hi, Meera. You're just late. You missed out on Renu's and other wonderful stories they shared. This is Meera, Renu's and my friend. She stays in the city of Hyderabad from India. We're just concluding the session.
Hello.
And
so nice
she sings beautifully and she plays ukulele, the musical instrument, and she's a lovely human being.
Oh.
So wonderful to meet you all. Renu added me to this group and she said, you could share some stories too. I joined in when Karuna was narrating. So lovely, beautiful. It's so wonderful to see you all and hoping to catch up next time again.
That would be great. So maybe you've got the link. So can you put your email in the chat and then we could send you a link next time? That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to say thank you to Rose for your story and for being here. Thank you, Gay. always a great listener. Just welcome you and honor you as a listener. Thank you, thank you. Sharon, thank you for the great historical story. You got it, you just wrapped it up so well. Awesome. Walter, welcome. And please come back. We'd love to see you next time. And Miro, and then who else? Genevieve, thank you for being here and look forward to seeing you at Genre.
Yes,
Oh.
absolutely.
Yes. And Laura, thank you for the exciting news about your book. It's great to hear a story. And is that everybody? Oh, no, Vicky. Thank you, Vicky. You awesome. You just rocked it, girlfriend. Thank you so much. Short notice.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Katie. The next time I get to narrate a story, I promise you a musical story with the ukulele.
Oh, that would be great. Did you put your email here?
Yes, she did.
Okay, you got it. Okay, thank you so much. That would be lovely. So join us, and at the beginning of the session, then we figure out who's going to be telling stories. So that would be lovely. We'll look forward to that. Thank you so much. Okay, I think that's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to the two of you and everybody else.
Did I say thank you to you, Genevieve? Yes, I did.
You did.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so maybe we should sign off the recording.
Let's see. Recording. Do you know? All right, here we go. Stop. Oh, you already. Okay. Stop recording.
You're recording it.